The Council on American Islamic Relations, CAIR, wants a meatpacking plant in Nebraska to give Muslim workers time to pray around sundown. Plan says that would interrupt the assembly line. Joining us now from Chicago, Ahmed, Rehab, head of CAIR's office in the Windy City. Okay, you know, more and more of these stories are surfacing now, and I'm wondering why they weren't surfacing 10 years ago. Well, we had American Muslims then. Now we have foot washes in some public universities. We have people, cab drivers, who don't want to carry people with wine. Now we have a meatpacking plant that the Muslim workers want to, time to pray around sundown, and the plant says, hey, that's in the middle of your shift. You know, we can't make an accommodation here. If we could, we would. But I didn't hear about any of this stuff 10 years ago. Why am I hearing about it now?
I think you're framing and contextualizing this issue inappropriately. It has no connection to any other case. It is its own case, and the case is simple. It is the failure of a corporation to provide the necessary and appropriate and reasonable accommodation, religious accommodation for workers in the workplace pursuant to Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, pure and simple. What
does that say, the Civil Rights Act?
What that says is if a worker were to request religious accommodation that is reasonable, they should be provided with that accommodation by the corporation or the entity for which they work. So that's precisely what is happening here.
If I say to my corporation, look, it's a holy day of obligation, I mean, we have in the Catholic Church a number of those, you got to let me go to Mass during the workout day, they got to let me go to Mass?
No, it depends. The law says so long as it does not provide any undue burden on the workplace, which I think makes a lot of sense.
Okay, but that's what this meatpacking plant, Swift and Company, says it does, that they can't interrupt their shift to let these guys go out and pray. How long would they have to pray, by the way?
Well, they pray for only 2 to 4 minutes. It's not a long time, but here's where the corporation is making a logical fallacy in its argument. What you just told me is that they have told you that it will disrupt the assembly line to allow them to pray. What is happening is that they are already allowed to get bathroom breaks for about 10 minutes during their shift, or 15 minutes. And it is during that time that these individuals attempt to engage in prayer.
Well, why
so
can't
they're already outside of the assembly line.
Oh, so you're saying that the Muslim guys are saying, look, I have to go to the bathroom, and then they pray, and well, they go real quick,
exactly.
And then they pray,
so
and then
they're already outside of the assembly
no.
line.
All right, I can't get in the middle of that because I don't know. Yeah. I'm not out there. But look, you dodged my first question, and I don't think you did it in a mean way, but I want to go back to it. I didn't hear about any of these controversies 10 years ago, and American Muslims were working in the system. I didn't hear about the foot baths, and I didn't hear about the cab drivers, and I didn't hear about the meatpacking guys. I didn't hear about it. So I'm saying to myself, this is an uptick in American Muslims demanding their rights. Am I wrong?
You are wrong, because there are many confounding factors that we have to look at. One is that there were no organizations or organized efforts to help those with complaints back then that could have surfaced this information to news agencies.
But you're making my point for me now that you have your organization, and there are others.
That's one factor.
That you're
what I'm saying is that's one factor, not the only factor.
Okay.
Another factor is that perhaps Muslims weren't large enough in number. Maybe they weren't aware of the rights back then as they are now.
So it's 0.5% of the population now, and it's always been in that realm. There are a few more, but not many more. Not a lot of American Muslims compared to the population. The final thing is, do you understand the backlash against this, Mr. Rehab? Even if you're correct, and it doesn't sound like you're taking a lunatic position, I have to say. It sounds like you could probably work this out with the company. If I were in charge of the company, if I were in charge of the company, you could work it out with me. I'd work it out. But there's a backlash. I mean, people don't want the foot washes. They don't want the cab driver saying you can't get in if you have a bottle of wine. Do you understand that?
Here's what I understand. If this complaint was such that these individuals were requesting some kind of unreasonable accommodation, I'd be the first to stand up and say that's not appropriate. But it is very reasonable, and I take it as a case-by-case basis.
Some of the others, I don't think the foot baths paid for by the taxpayer is reasonable, and I don't think the cab drivers are reasonable. But the cab drivers,
that's arguable. I'll grant you that.
Everything's arguable. That's why we do the program. Mr. Rehab,
but this is not. In the case of these Somali individuals, it's not arguable.
I think they should work it out. Mr. Rehab, thanks for coming on. We come